Yeah.
Boop-a-doop-a-doo.
Yeah.
Oh, good morning, Vikings fans.
I
This
don't know nothing.
is Morning Joe's, brought to you by Manscaped. Use discount code Morning Joe's, all one word, on manscaped.com, and you will get 20% off your next or first order with them. There'll be a link in the article about this episode on vikingsterritory.com and purpleptsd.com to take advantage of that discount as well. Manscaped.com, shave your entire body, so on and so forth. I'm Joe Johnson, owner of purpleptsd.com, vikingsterritory.com, purpleterritoryradio.com. I'm on the radio a few different places once a week. KDLM, KLGR in Redwood Falls. KDLM is in Detroit Lakes and all over northern Minnesota, namely on KDAL in Duluth via the BS show with Bob Sansevier. I am here with a Mankato radio legend and co-host extraordinaire, Mr. Joe Oberly. How you doing, man?
Good. Is it rolling, Bob? Oh, do you recognize that reference? It's an old
Yeah, from
Bob Dylan.
your favorite artist of all time.
Very
It
good.
it
Yes.
I for some reason I had to like redo my settings on YouTube Music. That's like the one I pay for on my phone, and that was one of my top 5 recommended artists. So
Nice.
I'm really heavy into
Indoctrinated.
his gospel period myself.
Oh,
But
nice. Yeah, he's that's some of the best music he had. He was at the peak of his powers musically back then. Some people did not like the lyrics from that era, but musically it was top drawer. And he's always got something decent to say, so it's
I've
worth
been
a
actually
listen.
really getting into the traveling wheelberries too,
Yeah.
and they got some jams. What a what an awesome group. Roy
Oh yeah.
Orbison.
Roy
Wow.
Orbison, George Harrison, Tom Petty, and Jeff Lynne, along with old
Yeah.
Bobby D. Yeah, yeah,
God.
it's something else. Like, how about that? Just to be able to, you know, have all these guys as your friends. Let's get together and make a few records. Excuse me, and uh, and then just go nuts and they just crank it out. It was a lot of fun when that stuff came out.
You know where that name came from? Traveling wheelberries.
I do not.
So Jeff Lynne was producing George Harrison stuff like that Cloud Nine
Mm-hmm.
album or whatever,
Yep,
which is
yep.
Got My Mind Set on You was my favorite song ever when I was a little kid. Um, and when they'd screw up, they'd say that they like we'll just bury it in post,
Really?
essentially. Yeah, and that's where that came from, and that makes sense as to why Jeff Lynne produced "Free as a Bird" and "Real Love" for the Beatles on that anthology when they used John Lennon's like home demo tapes, and they had to try to make it sound less like it was recorded on just a regular cassette player, and so he was good at burying some of those imperfections, and that's why they chose him over what was that dude's name? The fifth Beatle. I'm blanking on it. The producer.
Oh, George Martin.
George Martin. There you go. He was his said his hearing wasn't good enough at the time to do it the right way, so that's why they got
Interesting.
a little factoid. The reason that
That
we're
I
not
didn't
talking.
know. Yeah.
I am a weirdo that way. I always read a lot about things that I'm interested in. The reason that I'm avoiding the Viking is because
We'll bury it.
we'll we'll bury it in post.
That
Yikes.
no, we'll bury that game, right?
Barely the entire season. Now I don't. I've said this multiple times now, which should kind of make it seem as disingenuous as it's going to. Um, I take no pleasure in being right, or I didn't want to be right about this season. I didn't want to be right about a lot of my uh, off-season rants, but I am a little perturbed.
But you
Uh,
ain't wrong, brother. You ain't wrong.
it's. I wrote an article yesterday about the weird 2 week twist in from some people in Vikings media that wrote an article 3-4 weeks ago saying the Vikings were going to go to the Super Bowl, lose to the Steelers, so on and so forth, and now they're already writing articles about Zimmer being on the hot seat with very little self-reflection involved. And I get that predicting football is you're going to be wrong more often than you're right, but it just seems to me that. there were a few people in particular who were openly mocking my quote unquote reactionary takes to the draft or this offseason as just being hyperbole for effect. And now everybody's basically agreeing with me without really also realizing where that came from. And the only reason it bothers me is because not so much from a personal standpoint, again, that sounds disingenuous, but it feels like there are people who deep down, if you're already talking about Zimmer being on the hot seat, that means that the things that you said about him in the past were not as genuine. You know what I mean? Like you clearly had underlying concerns or thoughts about the way Zimmer ran this team. It's not as if, let's say that he was the perfect coach, as people said he was up until this point. Well, what do you want? He makes the playoffs every year. You're poo-pooing a playoff coach. People were making fun of Florio for saying when they extended Zimmer that the Wolves essentially paid for a playoff coach who is always in contention but never actually in contention. Essentially, always in the hunt but always in contention but never really in the hunt. It sells a lot of tickets, sells a lot of merchandise, but they're never actually going to win a Super Bowl with this guy. And people must clearly have believed part of that too after 2 weeks. Say this guy is already on the hot seat because that's. I mean, he was just extended. You know what I mean? So I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where you fall on that spectrum, but it seems like everybody now is basically saying Zimmer's never been the guy. A lot of the stuff that I've been, glorified defensive coordinator stuff, all that stuff seems to be in vogue now, and it just seems like I think people are afraid to say that because they want to be positive and then maybe get more access to the team, or the fans will like them more, so on and so forth. But where do you fall on that, on the whole, Zimmer being the fourth best rated coach to be fired first in Las Vegas and all of that?
I think it's a little early. I guess I need to go into my best coach Uncle Bernsey for this. They lose a bunch of their defensive players, and they get Michael Pearson here, and COVID happens. That ain't Zimmer's fault. Hunter goes out there, wrecks his neck. He can't play first. That's not Zimmer's fault. And Anthony Barr goes down. I love Anthony. Oh, he's the greatest. That's not Zimmer's fault. So, so
That was actually
sorry.
really good. I'm telling you,
I
man. There's a career in there somewhere.
it it's a little early. I go back to I mean, if you people are talking about getting rid of him now, how bad of a move would that be business wise? Because they just extended him.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you wait the whole season? I mean, this guy, what does Zimmer do well? He does builds defenses, and he
Yeah.
develops young players. He's
Yes.
got a whole new defense. This is the guy that took the Vikings defense when he came on from a bottom dweller to a top 10, top 5 in 1 to 2 years. He did
And
that. And
consistent, like more consistent than any
exactly.
other team in the league.
Why would you fire him now or next week if he gets beat by the Titans, so that and just blow it up and lose the opportunity for him to take these guys that he did draft to rebuild his defense, to develop them, give him, it was stupid. I don't even want him fired yet at the end of the year. But first you got to see how the year goes. I mean, anything could happen. I'm saying, but it's just silly. It's just nonsensical to me. The Wolves won't do it. It's not a good business decision. It will. If they want him gone so that the team can then tank for Trevor, fine. Because they would probably all cash it in after that. I have no idea. It's silly to be talking about it, but it's a way for headline writers to get some hits. That Zimmer's good.
Totally. And I think that people also, I think it's coming sort of from a different place than my perspective. And I've been pretty hard on Zimmer, more so than anyone else in Vikings media, I think. And I'm not saying to fire him now for a couple of reasons. First of all, if you were going to get rid of him, you should have done it before the draft, because, like you said, you might as well let him develop these guys, because he's been pretty good at that. I mean, he's been actually astounding at it. Um, and 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 so he got 15 picks. Let him develop those guys for a year or two. The second point being, what actual quality young head coaching candidate would want to come work for a team that has this situation, and Cousins is locked in no matter how you twist it for the next 2 seasons after this season. There's no way they're going to be able to get rid of him without eating, a team killing amount of dead cap space.
Right.
He's due
No,
basically $100 million still between now and 2022.
he was just extended. I mean, 2 games, you're gonna let him
hmm
go? It's goofy. It's just
It really is. I mean, if you were gonna again, I was for it before the draft because I knew that wasn't going to happen, but I felt like if the team felt enough, I think animus isn't the right word, but if they felt enough uneasiness about Zimmer to basically force the George Edwards firing, which was a huge signal that things needed to improve, they should have fired him then, because I think that a lot of where this is coming from some writers anyway, is that they really were buying into the fact that somehow a team that went from having one major question mark or two last season, the offensive line and then the play of Xavier Rhodes, to having arguably more question marks than answers after the offseason started and they just bled players left and right. How they were going to improve when they had this amazing position by position roster was that never made any sense to me. Everyone's saying, well, Rhodes is gone and these young guys can't be worse than him, so they're going to go 12-4 and blah blah blah. It's like that's never been how it worked for the Zimmer's system, A, or B, the Vikings in general. We're never that lucky. You can't replace the veteran continuity on defense, that a defense that takes a long time to acclimate to, with a bunch of guys who are 24 years and younger. And I think one of the bigger mistakes that they made this offseason was not bringing in some semblance of a veteran corner, at least to teach some of these younger guys. Maybe, I don't know why Terrence
they didn't have
Newman.
the cap room though. You know,
I don't. Do you remember ever hearing what happened? Why Terrence Newman what was the coach for like a week and then he quit?
I thought he didn't like it. He liked playing on the field, and I think he just didn't enjoy it. I don't think there was any reason or any problem because Zimmer and he were just Zimmer loved him.
Yeah,
The whole time he was coaching with the Vikings, and I had said a long time ago, I said I bet you he's be coaching. Zimmer's going to offer him a job as soon as he's gone, and he did. And I think it was that Terrence didn't like the coaching gig. I think he probably didn't like the travel. Had probably had his fill of that, and just
yeah.
wanted to have a different life. So
That doesn't surprise me because I was on a conference call with him last season, and he was. I mean, I didn't ask any questions, but I got I sort of felt like some of the questions were a little bit, they didn't mean to be, but they got more and more insulting as it was clear that it was bothering him, and people weren't picking up on that. About how old he was, how his
mhm.
career was over, what are you gonna do when your career's over, and he literally, like, you could tell it was bothering him. First of all, and then second of all,
Yeah,
he basically said, "I don't know. I haven't thought about it. I don't know what I'm
yeah.
going to do."
I
Uh,
asked him that question at training camp that year, and he was bristled about it. Then he didn't like it and didn't like being talking about that. You're exactly right.
Another thing that I think will go down as a gigantic mistake, in retrospect, and maybe, I don't know. I really wish I knew I was a fly on the wall for this in particular, but trading Diggs, I understand why they did it. At the time I said they had to do it. The more I look back on it, the more I'm like, there had to be a way to get him to shut up. I don't know how, or make him happy. I don't know if his problem was with Zimmer, or as everyone is now saying, like Judd Zulgad, that Diggs was right and he saw this coming and he wanted to bail. I don't agree with that argument because you're not paid to to be on a contender. You don't sign a contract for that reason. As a free agent, sure, but when you sign that contract, it doesn't mean you can automatically bail when things aren't going the way you want them to. That means, first of all, that assumes that things would be this bad if Diggs was here. I'm sure they would be pretty bad, but they'd be better. We wouldn't have Cousins forcing throws to Thielen over and over again as if that's the only guy that exists on the field. Um, and so I
Yeah,
never liked those trades because you never get the return on your investment. You don't even get half of it, rarely anyway. I mean, you could say the Percy Harvin thing netted Xavier Rhodes, who was all pro. That was great. But from a skill position standpoint, especially a wide receiver standpoint, as we've seen with Randy Moss, it took us over 10 years to finally find any, you know, consistency at the position, essentially, or at least, 6 or 7. Um, and then you
I
have
heard you
Diggs
bring
lighting things up in Buffalo, and it's a nightmare.
I heard you bring this up yesterday on the BS show, and so I knew you'd talk about it today. You know, all I can say is we're not in the room. You know, Diggs was clearly a malcontent. He's cryptic, but he got his message across on social media that he did not like things there for whatever reason, whether it was not being the number one guy, whether it was being an afterthought when compared with Adam Thielen, whether it was he didn't like Cousins and didn't think there was a chance for it to be, be on a contender, whatever it was. We don't know because that stuff was never said. And they're in the room. They have to evaluate: is this guy a locker room cancer in waiting? Is he just growing and mushrooming here? And we have to, strike while the iron's hot. Buffalo did make him a really good offer,
Yeah.
and at that point, you got to weigh it. You have to say, okay, this could get worse over here. We could, make him uh, do what we want and, hope that he doesn't implode on the sidelines and wreck anything we got going, because they went to the playoffs last year, won a first round game, and they were kind of ascending a little bit there, and maybe they thought their window was still open. Well, then if they think he's going to implode that, then you've got to do what's best. And the other thing is too, they probably, when they didn't go any further, they probably see that they're more have a better assessment of their team, I think, than we do, and they can see that they're heading into a rebuild. They know they are. They're not going to say it, and they're still not saying it, but it's a rebuild. I mean, their defense was gutted, for crying out loud. They still got a decent enough offense, but why not? Why not go? Understand that we got to start retooling now, and so then you make that trade, and you get a bunch of picks, and would I rather have Diggs on this team? Absolutely. I drafted him in fantasy football for the reason because I loved watching him play, and I like watching him on Sunday still when I can see him. So I'm. It hurt me like hell that he did what he did and he's gone. But I think they wouldn't have done it if they didn't feel that they had to. Just like
Yeah.
they did with Percy Harvin. Percy Harvin got to the point where he's throwing weights at the trainer, for crying out loud. Then you got to get rid of him. I'm not
Yeah.
saying Diggs did anything like that, but we're not in the room. We don't know what's going on. There's obviously something there that precipitated this because you don't break up one of the best combinations in the league. And those are, to have both of those receivers up, you're seeing, as you described, Thielen's double covered. Cousins is forcing it into him because he doesn't trust anybody else. They had the thing going there, and to give that up, it must have been something that they saw was untenable on the other side.
Yeah, and I mean that's a lot of wishful thinking on my end because I'm sure if he was around right now, I mean considering the way he reacted to the Bears game last week or last season, I'm sure he wouldn't be the most pleased with the how things are going on the offense.
Yeah,
My
yeah.
the reason that any of these thoughts even came up in my mind was because I don't understand why the Vikings, under Spielman, when they draft a receiver in the first round. I mean, I understand maybe under Treadwell because you all of a sudden had, the best one-two punch at the wide receiver position. That's really when that season is when that emerged more than it was in previous seasons.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the idea that you draft a replacement for Diggs and Justin Jefferson, and everybody's saying that he's got these monster stats in his senior season. He's not just a slot guy. You'll see he understands the offense very well. He can line up anywhere because the LSU ran a very similar system to Kubiak's system. And then not only is the offense struggling, but he's not part of the game plan whatsoever. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a big X's and O's guy. You know that, but you're going against the zone. You have no um, momentum or positive flow in your offense. Why not dink and dunk to a guy who's supposedly a playmaker? Why not try to get him more involved outside of garbage time? I don't get why. And everyone's saying, well, he's a
Leading
rookie.
receiver.
He's a rookie. He's whatever. BC Johnson had I know again you listen to the BS show, but I was trying to thread the needle of saying I'm not defending Cousins. Cousins had a bad game, but at the same time, those interceptions all weren't his fault. Two of them weren't his fault. They were deflected balls. Nobody was
One
catching.
one of them was thrown behind though. One of those
The
deflections
BC
was
one.
yes, that was
Yeah,
that was behind him, I think.
but
But
it just felt like, well, there's two things there. First of all, like these veterans didn't seem ready for the game, and I get that there was no preseason, but the other teams don't seem to have these issues. Second of all, going back to Jefferson, you spend a first round pick on a guy, you think that he would be involved in your game plan, especially when you have a gigantic need in every sense of the word, not just for deep balls or whatever, but to get just the offense going, the passing game going, so on and so forth. I don't even care if he's in the slot 100% of the time and taking away Thielen's jam. Like, do something with him.
well, he was the leading receiver on Sunday. 3 catches for 44 yards. Thielen was 3 for 31. Come on, Joe. Justin Jefferson was your leading receiver. No, I'm just kidding. Uh, um, that I think maybe that's what you're going to see from BC. I don't know what was going on there. One of those that he missed from Cousins was Cousins' fault. One of them was his. I think he had two drops, I believe. I can't remember for sure. But uh, you know, I think you've said this in the past, and you kind of reference it now. Is that they have all slot receivers. They don't have
Mm-hmm.
anybody to stretch the outside field, and
Yeah.
the defenses know that, and the Vikings know it too. They have not tried anybody deep. They have not sent anybody to try to stretch the field. I mean, you got Thielen doing it in garbage time against the Packers, but by that time it was too late. But it's all Thielen over the middle or Thielen in the flat or then Jefferson in the slot, and on and on and on. Even BC, it's like you've got to have some. And if they don't have those skills yet, this is what you're going to get, and they're going to get shut down. I mean, that's not working. Passing game's not working. The running game is not working, which boggles the mind. And everybody's talking about why not more carries for Dalvin Cook. I know this is probably your next thing to
Yeah.
talk about, but uh, he had most carries, which were 14, but it's not working. They're not opening holes, and it's so difficult to swallow when you see one mega millionaire hand the ball off to another mega millionaire, and it goes for 2 yards in a cloud of crushed rubber.
Yep.
It's just frustrating as heck. So I heard I read it somewhere that they're saying that maybe Cousins isn't comfortable in this offense, and
Oh.
I'm not sure I understand that because it had to have similarities to last year's, and I'm not enough X's and O guy to point out whether it is or isn't the same. If that was Stefanski's offense or a hybrid last year, but I don't understand. I have seen more rollouts, which is nice, and
Yeah.
getting Cousins out there, but I know we got to talk about Cousins because you're not defending him, but you're not trashing him either, and not saying that you should, but he just looks unsettled, and I don't even know that he's getting rushed that hard back there. So
Yeah, so like I said this on the BS show yesterday too, so you probably know where I'm going with it. But a lot of people are saying, why would you bring in a guy who can only perform when he's under perfect
yeah,
circumstances? And when I argued hard for him to come here, I felt like that was the case, right? We had the best one-two punch, we had a promising running back, but I was also operating under the assumption that they would invest some draft capital in protecting him, which they refused to do. I'm not blind to Cousins' uh, issues. I just think that some people look at that as the sole reason the offense isn't functioning, and I don't think
no,
that's a
no,
fair assessment.
it's not.
Um, I mean, I don't know. I didn't do a lot of shows over the summer, but a big part of my I would say frustration with the offseason was why extend Cousins at all? if you're going into this rebuild? Why put
Yeah,
$100 million
good
into a
question.
guy when the team's not going to be good at any point? Is it to save your job, or is it to actually do what's best for the franchise? And I feel like now we're saddled with a quarterback in Cousins who maybe with Zimmer, and we'll see how the rest of the season goes, will win enough games to not get us in contention for a guy like Trevor Lawrence, which is irritating because that's been the story of the Vikings' entire history, is that they're never bad enough to take advantage of these once in a lifetime or once in a generation or once in a decade or once every 5 years even quarterbacks. We never get them because we're never that bad enough. And
Right. This
and
would be the year to do it though, because you're not selling tickets. You know,
exact
there's nothing to put a product out. There's no reason to put a product out there
no.
because you know, I mean, you're not losing any ticket revenue. So
And
and
Zimmer,
that's why,
like you said, Zimmer and Spielman can't. It would be astounding if they got fired this early. I
yeah,
mean, Childress got fired the season after his extension, I believe.
right, correct.
But like you said, there was more to it than that. There was the whole Troy Williamson funeral thing, and a lot more than that. They brought him in to be a sheriff because of all the bad press they were getting for like the boat scandal and all that. But he didn't know when to turn it off, and so I would be massively surprised if that was the case. But now you're saddled essentially with a quarterback and a running back who I'm sure because this is the Vikings will end up getting injured in a week or two for the rest of the season, and it'll probably be like they'll be
I was thinking he won't, Joe, because he's not going to get the ball enough. But anyway, go
there
ahead.
you go. But there was a great article written during the off season by one of our writers. I forget who, but actually no, I wrote it, and I was
Go
shows
ahead.
you how much how much thought I put into myself. It was an article that was written on a different website that I was talking about
Uh,
as well, and it
okay.
was the crux was that teams that spend over 17.5% of their cap space on a quarterback and a running back tend to be sub 500 teams, and they
Mm.
really don't make the playoffs very often. And even before his extension, the Cousins and Cook, their numbers were like 16.9, and anything above 10 million a year for Cook would have put them over 22%. Right now, basically, they're over 30% of their cap is on those two guys, and that's
Here,
insane for a
here
team.
comes here comes a restructure for old Dalvin Cook 1 year, half a year after he gets his contract.
And
I
Cousins
I heard
should, but I'm sure he won't,
I
because he's
read
probably
stuff
thinking
about
the
that.
writing's on the wall. But
Yeah,
especially with the cap potentially getting reduced next year,
right. I heard a good
40%.
quote.
Ugh, how do you
I wrote a
build a
good
winning team?
read a good quote this morning from I can't remember his first name, Bakhtiari, left tackle for the Packers.
Oh
His
yeah, David,
his
I think.
contract and Aaron Jones's contract are both up at the end of the year, and they're talking about how they're going to get him done. And he basically said the Chiefs started last year with $100,000 left in their cap, and they restructured and got all these guys signed, and improved their team. He says the bottom line with all the restructuring and all this and all that, and delaying it for years to come, you can sign it because they can. If they want to keep a guy, they can keep a guy. If they want to keep me, they'll get it done. Which is, and he's right. He's exactly right because how did we never thought that they were going to get Cook done because they had to all these things they bring in Yannick and Ngakwe and they still got to get him done and everybody else. Look, oh my God, someone's going to go, but they still get it done because they delay everything and then you have to pay the piper. The Vikings are kind of paying the piper this year because their team's imploding a little bit. They're rebuilding. They had to get rid of some big contracts or they couldn't keep all those guys on defense that Zimmer developed. So I think you can get it done, but I read also yesterday that there's a whole situation with Kirk's contract. You're not going to save that much if you do restructure him. It's so messed up. It's like you still got to take some people are talking about trading him, or the only thing you're left to do is either trade him or play him. Is the bottom line with
Yeah, you can't. I mean, people are saying put Nate Stanley out there, see what happens. I mean, I guess for tanking reasons, but
right?
you can't. You have to play him. The only hope that they have in that regard is from a trade perspective would be San Francisco because Kyle Shanahan loves Cousins so much, and it would have to be one of those trade and restructure situations,
Yeah.
that he would have to agree to do that. And I could maybe see the 49ers doing that. But outside of it,
Well, he might
you're
lose his Pizza Ranch endorsement then.
oh no. What a horrible name for a business. That's on par with Dress Barn. Who wants to go, "Hey honey, we're going to the Dress Barn." What? It's like sounds like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Um
Um,
but yeah, I mean there's just so many problems on offense. A lot of people are looking at Kubiak and his play calling and I don't understand it either. Maybe there's something to be said with this new movement of younger offensive minded head coaches that are doing these things, and the Vikings are basically have like a Mount Rushmore of you know peak 1990s head coaches. Dom Capers, uh, Zimmer obviously is very old school Parcellian and what he does in every sense of the word.
how do you
Kubiak,
how do you even know what his offense is like? It hasn't been
I
on the field.
I mean, that's a really good point. I mean, people are ripping the defense, but their Vikings are so far behind other teams in terms of
Oh my
time
goodness,
of possession that it's
it's
like
incredible.
it's historic.
It is.
And so yeah, that's a really good point. And I don't know what you sacrifice pass protection as we've seen, and as VikingsTerritory.com exclusive podcast. Odds and ends with Mike Tice talks about a lot. The scheme is more predicated on running the ball, run first team, blah blah blah. They're not, like you've alluded to, they're not giving Dalvin the ball. I don't know why. I don't know what the problem
I,
is. I don't
I,
know.
I I did, Joe. Sorry to interrupt. I did like last week how everybody thought that they were just going to come out there and try to run the ball this past Sunday to and the Colts were going to sell it to stop the run. So what did they do? They threw three straight passes to
Yeah,
Adam Thielen, and it worked. It got him downfield. It was great. Um, but that so I liked that idea, to throw him off guard a little bit, but you've still got to establish that run and get him going. But I don't know if you're going to against a good defense with the offensive line yet. They're okay there, but they're limited, and maybe be okay in pass protection this year. I don't know. Cousins hasn't been hit that much. Seems to be getting him outside of the pocket. Well, I guess he was hit a few times, but. So, you know, like I said, I don't know how you can totally uh, uh, talk about their offense yet, and because we really haven't seen it. The defense can't get off the field, and the
hmm
offense can't stay there. So it's just
and it's strange because both games, the first drive, which is the scripted drive,
right.
seems to work for them, and then after that, it's nothing, and then there's a
Hmm.
safety. Um,
It
but
really is
yeah,
tough.
it's sending over the agenda last night and talking to you this morning before the show. It was kind of like uh, it's so similar to what happened week one that
Oh
it's
God,
we're
yeah,
kind of looking at the same things. But I will say I'm
that's
surprised
scary,
by
man.
it really is. It wouldn't be if it was, obviously they were winning in spectacular but similar ways. But again, I mean, getting back to the original point, I feel like I thought that 6-10 was a bit generous on my end when I did my record prediction for this season, but I also thought that I didn't think it would be this bad this quickly. I thought that
No,
Zimmer would
no.
be able to paste together something that would be, somewhat. I mean, because he went 7-9 his first season. Granted, they had more veterans and everything, but he turned it around relatively quickly, and he seems to be the type of guy that wins a lot of meaningless games. But yeah, this could be bad, but let's just hope that it's bad enough to get them. I don't know. I don't watch a lot of college football myself, especially outside of the Big Ten. I don't know how good. I know Trevor Lawrence has been, a stud and top overall pick. Everyone's been talking about him for a
Hmm.
couple years. I've watched one game of his where he was amazing, but I'm sure if the Vikings somehow ended up landing him, he would, you know, end up getting leprosy or something with any luck. I don't see
I
it
saw
happening.
I saw some people slotting the Vikings already at getting the third pick, and it would be there's two quarterbacks, and then the next guy would be a left tackle, and that would
That sounds
improve.
familiar.
and that would improve things just as much if you think of left tackle that high. I know Matt Khalil.
Yeah.
If you think someone that is going to be decent, that helps out. That helps the line. That helps Cousins. And blah 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 blah. But
Do you
you
think
know,
teams ever actually actively tank in the NFL?
I don't know. I think they quit. I don't know if they tank, like they're trying to do something. I think they stop caring as much because you have to be up emotionally for every game. And like I tweeted out the other day, I thought all that talk was kind of silly because I mean, what in Mike Zimmer's makeup do you think is going to allow his team to tank? He's
Yeah,
64 years
it's not
old,
gonna happen.
fourth oldest coach in the league. He's win now. I mean, that's all he's got left. I mean, he
Yeah.
did just get a new contract, but he's a win now guy. Kubiak's the same way. They're both older guys. They're not gonna start playing for 3 seasons down the road because they don't even know if they'll be there. The other thing is too, I don't. They got enough veterans still on this team that they don't want to either. This is the rest of their time. They're also playing for their legacy. People like Harrison Smith, who uh, they, these guys are professionals. Do you see him tanking?
No, I
Harrison,
could see
no.
Zimmer we could be, in first place in that regard at the end of the season, and I could see Zimmer like going for two instead of going to overtime to win to blow the tank for Trevor thing. That's exactly how I have it in my
The
mind.
thing is, though, Joe, what we've seen so far, you don't have to do any tanking. My goodness, they they have. It's been kind of epic. I mean, in so many metrics, you start looking for the Vikings and where they're listed, and you go, "Oh my God, they're down in the 30s in all of them." Yardage and passing yards and rushing defense and blah 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 blah. It's just, it's incredible. And I'm kind of embarrassed about my preseason prediction. I might have mentioned I do this bet with my cousin every year, and when he said they'll be 10-6 and I get the over or under, and I took the under because I thought they were going to be bad, and I generally never do because I'm such a homer down deep. And so then they trade for Yannick. I said, oh, okay, maybe that defense might be able to help out those new cornerbacks. So I said, okay, I'll take the over. Oh my
Oof.
God. Yeah, I know. So I'm already losing that one. He's already given me grief, but I don't know, Joe, where there's five. I'm having trouble finding 5 wins on the schedule. Yeah, a
Me,
couple
yeah.
maybe from the Lions, the Panthers, and the uh, one other one that was, and maybe one of the Bears games, and that's about it. Oh,
Do we play the Jets
Panthers and
6 times?
Panthers. No, the Jaguars. I think they can beat the Jaguars. Zimmer usually does pretty good against them. So,
But the
um,
Jags beat the Colts,
yes, they did. Yes, they did.
and
But they're the ones that are supposed to be tanking. They traded Yannick.
hmm that's what I was
So
thinking the same thing. But you have to look at it too with the loss of Anthony Barr
yeah.
from
Oh, it's like I
looking.
said,
It's
you
it's bad. That's so bad. I
you
mean,
don't
it's
have
good
anything.
if you're looking at it that way, but it's.
Hardy
Uh,
Nickerson is going to be playing linebacker all of a sudden for this team. He's been around forever.
I was gonna say that name reminds me of like the '90s for some reason,
Yes,
like
it does.
like those weird giant
Tank.
shoulder pads. Um, So what,
No,
from
that
my
that
understanding, from an X and O's perspective, not to interrupt you, but I saw a tweet from Luke Braun saying that Zimmer had really simplified what the corners were doing, but then overly complicated what the linebackers were doing to compensate for it, and now they
Mhm.
can't do either. So they're going to be running a lot of just base defenses.
Yeah,
Yikes!
I believe that. I mean, I was going to say that earlier. You were talking about Zimmer, and he his defense, he doesn't even usually let rookies start in his defense. It's so
Yeah,
complicated, and so he's being forced to now. So they are clearly in a rebuild for them to have to do this. And then now as you start going through attrition, and I'm saying we're seeing a lot of attrition around the league just because these teams haven't had their full off season, to prepare. But players are going to start going down and getting hurt, and you're going to be the the Vikings are going to be a top or a bottom five team. They're gonna get a good pick one way or the other, and it's not because they're trying to. I
it would
just
be cool. It would be cool to get Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah,
Just
would be.
because it's something that we just don't ever experience here. You know what I mean? Like there
Mm-hmm.
was that season. where they could have basically had RG3 or Andrew Luck, and who knows what would have happened with RG3 had they not pushed him in the playoffs and ruined his knee. Um, so we'll see. I mean, that would be a huge boon. It's very interesting, and we're seeing a lot of people. I mean, speaking of attrition, we don't really know what's going to happen with the salary cap next year, but a lot of people are saying that it's basically the end of Anthony Barr's time here in Minnesota,
Yeah, saw that.
and that would be huge. I mean, he's
It
still
would
in the
be.
prime of his career. I forget what his contract status is, but he's it's a changing of the guard. And but I still feel like they painted themselves in such a corner that it's going to be hard to really attract any sort of outside of getting Trevor Lawrence and having him on the bench for a year or two, or even having him start over Cousins, or just paying Cousins a tremendous amount of money, and maybe Cousins has made enough money to take a pay cut or whatever. But I don't see them really being a
If I
huge attractive gig for anybody.
Yeah, for free agents. Well, Barr signed before last season. Remember, he flirted with the Jets and then stayed here.
Oh
So,
yeah, you're right. Yep. And so
um, so his contract might be hard to get out of or trade or something. It's probably a pretty decent one, but
and I don't know how the guys Zimmer has drafted in this 15 pick draft. I mean, that's gonna could be the story of the next 4 or 5 years. And again, it's not going to be attractive for head coaches to come in and say, okay, well, 40% of the new salary cap is in two players, and there's a bunch of guys on defense that are predicated on the way that Zimmer does things, not necessarily the way that we would do things. But they need a new set of eyes on this thing, and that doesn't guarantee that any new regime would be better than this one. But it does at least guarantee that you have a better chance, just because again, Zimmer has had and he gets credit for it. Him and Spielman built an amazing roster, and I think Sansevier said something about when he sees Ziggy after losses that he looks pained, and I do think that they've done everything the right that a coach or that a ownership group could do. They've spent every dime in every way. They've made this team world class in terms of facilities, so on and so forth. And I don't think that they're going to be okay with more than one season of this. But I always thought that behind the scenes, like you said, they're not going to say we're rebuilding or that we're bad or that we're this or that. But I think everyone knew that this year was going to be rough. And then if there weren't market improvements more towards the end of the season or the start of next season, then you're looking at a new coaching staff. But
Dig says nothing off on social media. That's Zimmer's fault. That's Zimmer's fault. Um,
there's a clip of him on YouTube where he starts swearing at a reporter.
this is exactly what I'm mimicking. Joe.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
that's why I can see
It,
that video clip.
it's one of my all-time favorites. I've watched it many times. It's the whole Bob Schnelker rant. It is a classic, and it's one of the all-time. They listed coaching rants, ESPN or something. It's one of
Yeah.
the top 10. There's no two
Who
ways
is Bob
about it.
Schnelker?
He was the offensive coordinator for Burns when he was coaching back in when they got Herschel Walker and they had the season when they were trying to go for it all too, And Schnelker was the offensive coordinator, and he was a former tight end in the league. He played for the Vikings for a couple of years. He came from Wisconsin, I think Green Bay, and he was the lightning rod for that entire failure. And that's why he's up there. That's not Schelker's fault. This guy gets hurt. That's not Schelker's fault. He's going on and on saying all these things, and some guy fumbles, and yeah, it's classic. If you haven't seen it,
I'll post a link to it in the article for
yeah.
the show.
I'm still hanging with Zimmer. I give him the opportunity to fix it. What I don't understand, Joe, is a little bit is Kirk Cousins. The fact that he's just got this monstrous deal, and at some point, don't you say, I gotta restructure this thing so they can get some offensive linemen in here to protect me so that I can actually do what I want? Or do you want to go out there each week, get beat up, and perform poorly and then go to the bank. I used to say the same thing about Kevin Garnett when I was working at the Timberwolves. He signed the biggest contract in the history of maybe professional sports at the time.
Yeah.
And it's like there's nothing left for anybody else. You got to have a few more players around you. And so that's why they struggled to go very far with him because he ate up all the cap space. And it's the same thing with Cousins. I know the position commands it. I get that, and you got to pay quarterbacks money to keep them, but dang nation, I mean, we got to get a little bit more out of him, and some of it's not his fault, but plenty of it is, and he just looks he doesn't look like a $45 million man to me out there. It's I'm sorry to say.
Yeah, I mean, you're paying him as much as I mean, I was watching the Chiefs game and what Mahomes is doing and the money that he's making, and it's just like, ugh,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know, it,
Oh, and I can't wait to see Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray. I went to the preseason game of the Vikings last year when he came to town, and I turned to my brother and said, "Well, he's young and he's raw, but that guy can move, and he's going to be something." So I drafted him this year too, and I've been enjoying that in fantasy football. I wish the Vikings would have a shot at something like that. It would be nice to then build. You could build around that person. You bring him in, you let him maybe study under Cousins 1 to 2 years, and then second year you start phasing him in. But in the meantime, you're building around him because this is the guy, and he's on a rookie contract, blah blah blah. So, but the Vikings, like you said, have never had that opportunity. They've always just been, one too many to be in the bottom third of the draft, and you very often they don't have that opportunity to get these good young quarterbacks, and there's a lot of them in the league right now. I think.
yeah, it's a completely different ball game, and
God, I just think I advocated to tank for Trevor. My goodness, what's wrong with me? So
yeah, I know, it's just strange. I mean, it's really looking though like it's gonna be the Vikings and the Jets, which means it'll be the Jets. Um,
yeah.
I can I the Panthers are 0-2, but they picked up my guy in Hakeem Butler. I wish the Vikings would have done that. I don't know. I mean, they gotta do something. I, mean, I don't know if it's getting Tajay Sharp more involved instead of BC Johnson because he's shown some flashes. That there's one deep ball that he was open on, I think, week one that didn't end up working out because of Cousins. But it's just looking so rough, and it's strange for us as a business because really we started in 2015, but we really didn't start, looking at this from a business perspective. It was more just a soapbox for me to complain and then post my stuff to Reddit and whatever until like end of 2016. And so every year it's been like an off season of one more piece and then we're gonna make it. And it's a lot of success and hopes and dreams. And that would seem to be the case even this off season. I won't lie. My uh, my melancholy abated for a minute when we got Ngakwe. I thought, wow, maybe they are doing something. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how the rest of the season goes. Speaking of which, they play the Titans this weekend. I can't imagine. I mean, they're underdogs at
At
home,
home,
which
yeah.
is would have been unheard of last season or even the season before. Tennessee obviously is a playoff was a playoff team last year. They have a couple good running backs. That's a huge problem. Um, that the Vikings, I mean, again, a litany of problems, but the lack of a real nose tackle, losing Linval Joseph, and then
Hmm.
having Michael Pierce opt out, then having PJ Hall fail that physical. Jaleel Johnson didn't get a lot of playing time at the three tech position, let alone playing as a nose tackle, and they just can't stop anybody because they're running right up the gut and you have nothing there. And at least you had Anthony Barr, even though that was more of a Eric Kendricks jam situation. But it's going to be hard to stop Derrick Henry and company.
Oh my,
Jonathan Taylor, we all know is a good running back. Obviously, seeing him play against the Gophers
Big
light
Ten,
them up.
Big Ten. Yeah,
Hey,
I got it.
yeah, well, it is a little frustrating when you're that close to Wisconsin and you see why they're good at what they are good at, and then you look at teams like the Packers who have these beefy offensive linemen,
Hmm.
and then the Colts have these giant offensive linemen. I'm not even talking about Big Ten guys, but just I don't really agree with the 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 smaller, lighter, faster offensive linemen. I don't see how that benefits the run game either. I mean, it hasn't. Um, but that's one of the main reasons the defense can't get off the field. That
Yeah.
and the corners are playing 10 yards off the ball, so every you know, there's been
And,
things
and,
that the color commentators have said during these games that are just embarrassing to hear from about your team. They're averaging 7 yards on every first down. That's astounding. Or they got to try to just throw the ball to somebody else to see who else outside of Thielen can even catch. It's like,
when you talk
what are we
about
watching?
yeah, when you talk about they're running a base defense for those corners. That's going to be easier than heck for someone like Aaron Rodgers to pick apart, and some of the other quarterbacks that we got coming in here in the next few weeks. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, a couple weeks. You think what do you think Russell Wilson will do with that? You know,
Oh,
or
can you imagine?
yeah, yeah. So it's going to be brutal, and
You're right, though. I don't see how they even get to 3 wins the way things are looking. It's I'm gonna have to relook at the schedule and see which games are home games and whatnot. But they could this could be a 2-14 season if that. I mean,
oh, can't be. Please don't be worse than Steckel. Please, no, no. I got to get 4 wins. I got to get four.
is 3-13 the worst record they've had, or have they had
Yes,
two?
yes.
Okay,
After the early years, I mean, I think there was that one that was close to that in their expansion years, one of the first couple of years. But I don't know how. I'd have to go back and look. But yeah, that's the all-time low, 3-13 with old Les Steckel, the Iron Man. So,
wow. So how
uh,
did the prediction segment go last week?
well, for
I
what it's
must have
worth,
won again.
no, you didn't. I did.
What?
Yeah, that's correct. You
Didn't you
had
pick
you.
you picked them to win though, right? I guess that it doesn't have
It,
any bearing on how
it
things
had
actually
never
go.
has. No, no. We just go score because uh, I keep the record on who's and you're 2-0 and I'm 0-2 as far as that goes. But as far as the picking contest, it's all about points. And you picked them 38-27 Colts, and I picked the Vikings 24-23. So you were 26 off total, and I was 18 off. So I picked up 8 points. So I'm now
Nice.
I'm down by 17 to you, and
Okay.
therefore I have to go first. So now, yeah, getting a little ahead of yourself there, are you, Joe? Hmm?
See, I know something bad's about to happen anytime I get confident in
Yeah,
anything.
I know how that goes. I have no confidence. This is tough for me because I generally, you know, pick the Vikings. It's
Yeah.
very rare in the past few years that I have picked against them, and most of all because I knew Zimmer had puts a good defense out there, and I could always justify how I thought they were going to win, and generally I've been pretty good because the team has been pretty good. But this week I got to pick the Titans. I think that after what I've seen the past 2 weeks, it is it might not be pretty. It's just as you just laid out with the running game. Derrick Henry. I mean, the way they made Jonathan Taylor ran over him. That in his first start as a pro. My goodness,
Mm,
wait till Henry starts running downfield on him. I got the Titans 28-20.
wow. Yeah, I'm going the same route. I think that it's gonna be it really is just gonna come down to how far down the Titans push the pedal, I guess. So I'm gonna go 34-13. Titans are going to win. Um, 0-3. Yikes.
Yeah, I mean,
Yikes.
I saw someone say the other day, and it might not be wrong. It might be until the bye, and they don't have a win because they've got Tennessee, then Houston, then at Seattle, and then the Falcons come here. If they don't beat the Falcons, they could be 0-6
Then
going into
that's the
the bye.
bye.
Yeah,
Wow.
and they come out with the Packers out of the bye, and there's 0-7, and the Lions and the Bears after that. And then you got the Cowboys, and you've got Tampa, and you've got New Orleans yet.
Jeez. So yeah, I've had like I alluded to before, we haven't had a really bad team since we started doing this, and I was like, I'm worried about how the traffic's gonna be, and someone said the best either like a
Yep.
mediocre team isn't great, but having a really bad team actually is good for traffic because people want to see theoretical things. They're emotionally invested, and so on and so forth. So I guess we will find out. It's a brave new world we're living in.
It really
Um,
is. You know, Joe, I've suffered through 0-2 starts in the past, but I've always had this confidence. Oh, they'll figure it out, and they'll turn around and they'll start playing. I'm not feeling that yet. You know,
yeah,
I don't. You know, you look at that defense and it's been gutted, and the offense is discombobulated. There's nothing there that makes me feel like, oh, well, they'll figure it out. I mean, they just need to get their. These are their preseason games. They need to figure out who they are and start playing and you know get hit their groove. Mm, I
yeah.
don't know.
No,
I
there's
don't know.
been it's been hard to actually get like put your finger on one specific thing. Everything's so bad. I can't
Yeah,
even think of really of a positive. And you're completely right. There's been bad starts before, but it's been like, man, they could have pulled that one out if this wouldn't have happened, or
right.
Thielen hadn't fumbled that punt or whatever. No, yeah, it's all bad. Which again, somebody predicted, and that person is me. Hooray! um, but yeah, if people want to get any sort of male grooming product, you can go to manscaped.com. Use uh, promo code Morning Joes, all one word. The M and the J are capitalized. I'm not sure if that matters, but you get 20% off. They have some really, really great stuff that's in
I
transit.
need I need to see that beard trimmer. Mine, I'm looking a little shaggy, Joe.
You got your COVID beard going on. So
That's right.
word on the street is I got a text just right before we went on air from Jordan, who hosts the Load the Box podcast on our network, that his stuff showed up like today because they were asking
Nice.
whether or not they should promote it before the stuff comes, and he's like, "Wow, it actually just showed up." So hopefully we'll get our stuff today, and then we can talk about it next week. That's really all we have to look forward to at this point. Is
Well, we'll be looking good. The Vikings might not be, but we will be.
It'll be like that scene in the Royal Tenenbaums when Luke Wilson shaves his beard off and then cuts his wrists. That's the way the
Nice.
season. That's the way the season's going. Might have been a little. The guys from the Manscaped said to kind of riff on their products. I don't think that's what they meant though.
Probably not.
Manscaped.com, your number one choice. Anyway, thanks everyone for tuning in. I know it's been a rough season, but it's kind of fun to all, well, obviously talk to you about it, but then also have people, listen to our stuff and kind of join in on the misery loves company aspect of things. So we will be back next Wednesday, bright and early at 9:30 in the morning. Hopefully you can tune in live. And other than that, this has been Morning Joe's for the 23rd of September, 2020. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Skol.